What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was framed by the leaf but came back as the Lord of Shadows? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. A group of rogue ninjas stalked quietly through the dense forest. They needed to act soon if they were going to infiltrate Konoha village for their master. They had been given one mission, one they had to fulfill at all costs. They looked out for the sign of ambush squads who may have been alerted to their presence and constantly gripped weapons in their hands. There were 5 ninjas in the group. 2 brown-haired, 1 white-haired, 1 blonde and 1 a deep black. The black-haired man was obviously the leader. He signaled to the others and the group gathered tighter together. They had more than one reason to be cautious. Not only were they wanted criminals, they had heard the alarming tales of Konoha's shadow, a mysterious ninja who had no other job but to slaughter, or so it seemed. What the group failed to remember was that the shadow wasn't called a shadow for nothing. He operated best in dark places. Belatedly, the white-haired man gasped and whispered, "Hikage," before he slumped to the floor, crimson blood gargling from his sliced throat. The 4 remaining ninjas paled and backed into each other. Hands shaking, they faced what would ultimately be their death. Within 10 seconds of the first death, one of the brown-haired men and the blonde also slumped to the ground. The black-haired man twisted his head this way and that, trying to get a lock on their target. Not only could he not find him, but his remaining partner cried out as a katana was plunged through his heart. The man turned round to face the Hikage. A pair of eyes looked at him, reflecting his own face, revealing misery, pain and, most alarmingly, his fear. The black-haired man hadn't felt fear since he was a child and now his eyes had betrayed him. Before the katana was plunged into his chest, the man noted that his murderer's eyes revealed nothing. They showed almost no color, perhaps a watery light violet if any. He managed to close his eyes just before he felt the tug of death call him. He was one of the countless numbers of rogue or threatening people that the Hikage had killed for Konoha and its people. A dark shape proceeded to clear the 5 bodies from the clearing. He was unhappy that he hadn't been able to finish them off as cleanly as he hoped, but they were dead and the master's plan couldn't be fulfilled. Yet, anyway, the man dragged 2 bodies, the brown-haired men, behind him and carried the rest over his shoulders. Before he dumped them in the pit he had reached, he cut a lock of hair from each, tying them with chakra strings. He then took all personal items from the corpses and then cut out an eye from each body. It was nasty work, but he had grown used to it by now and regarded it as regular procedure. He pocketed 5 eyeballs and drew a small swirl on each of the men's cold foreheads before kicking them into the pit. It was an unfortunate custom that he had grown accustomed to, yet it was a warning to outsiders and also a way to prove his mission was completed. Not only was the Hikage ruthless, he was thorough, a combination of 2 deadly traits. A grateful growl came from the pit. Various carnivorous animals appeared from caves dotted round the edge of the pit. Lions, tigers, wolves and bears each claimed 1 body until only the black-haired corpse was left. The animals eyed it nervously, then stalked back to their hiding places. The Hikage closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. He nodded to the empty space, as if he was agreeing with the animal's choice. "I wouldn't have wanted him if I had the choice." He paused and a dark, sinister voice broke through the silence in his mind. "You don't." Sighing, the man dropped into the pit and pulled back his mask. It was a simple black cloth with holes for his eyes and slits for breathing. It slid down his face, revealing scarred cheeks and scruffy blonde hair. Closing his eyes, the man performed a few hand seals and, after a few seconds, a large fox shimmered into existence next to him. It was the size of a large wolf with canine teeth that were razor sharp. Red eyes regarded the man for a second before they turned to the body. Without any hesitation, the fox began ripping apart the flesh and tugging on muscle. It crunched through bone and sinew happily, enjoying the food. He ate surprisingly quickly and sat down to clean his paws after a few minutes. Naruto visibly relaxed, glad that the fox had finished. He knew that it was a necessity, he needed to eat and, as the part of him that was human no longer did, the fox part had to. That had started 5 years ago, when he was 15. Naruto had come back to Konoha after training under Jiraiya. Tsunade had taken him aside after a quick report from both Jiraiya and him. She had enlisted him into Anbu, for reasons unknown. After a long week, she had abruptly called him to her office and talked over options with him. She had given a choice he couldn't refuse. Either he had to become a great weapon to Konoha or he would have his power sealed, which meant death because of the Kyuubi's enormous power. He had no choice but to accept. Amazingly, he didn't blame her for the choice. He had always known that Konohagakure's council would one day put a bill on his head. Luckily for him, this bill had turned out options and he seized the option of life. He was then subject to severe training, which he was never going to forget and unlikely to share with anyone. When he had come back from this training, he had refused to eat and, due to the severity of the issue, his demon had separated itself from his body and formed its own body, almost. What the fox truly was a form of image. It appeared to be a fox, but it was something darker. Something similar to chakra but, at the same time, more sinister and frightening than anything else. It was made of complex shadows that had been summoned from places that Naruto had encountered during his training. Even though the fox appeared a single being, it was attached to Naruto, as they had bonded deeper during the secret training and now, both were required for Naruto to function properly. They did everything together and through each other. They were give equal power as Kyuubi realized that Naruto was the only way in which he could get what he desired, blood. In return for unlimited power, Naruto gave Kyuubi the blood from his victims. The demon enjoyed the killing and, if he didn't, Naruto most likely would have died helplessly a long time ago. Their bond went much deeper though, deeper than anyone could guess. The two had become close friends, if that's what it could be called. The only one each of them could trust would be the other and, if Kyuubi had been a separate person, the two would be inseparable anyway. The demon turned its blood-red eyes to Naruto. It looked deep into his eyes and let his body break apart and be drawn through those eyes into the warm darkness it called home. As soon as the fox was inside him again, Naruto rubbed his stomach. "You wolf down your food. Can you at least be a little slower? If we're attacked it lies heavily and, well, you know that's when accidents happen, if my senses are occupied." A silence followed, then a deep laugh. "If you ate yourself, you wouldn't need to waste energy summoning shadows for me. Then you could eat at your pace. Anyway, since when have you made mistakes?" Naruto knew the fox was right. Sighing, he lightly traced his seal through his black garments. He was clad in black trousers with flat black shoes. Covering his body was a thin black top covered with a deep black coat. The coat had buttons down to the waist where it stopped at the front. Two tails of material hung just past his knees. It had been a gift from the Hokage when she had employed Naruto's services and he thanked her for it whenever he needed to keep a low profile. He stared longingly at the stars and the moon, wishing he could be an innocent genin again, with nothing to fear. He missed being part of a team but, after Sasuke had left the village, Team 7 had been ripped apart and each of the members began training, each one under a member of the Sannin, a legendary group of ninjas. A snap of a twig brought him back to the modern day. Someone thought they could sneak up on him. Pretending to be oblivious, he walked along the edge of the pit. Before he had reached the nearest tree, about 10 meters away from where he had been standing, someone jumped down from the pit side. Naruto narrowed his eyes and hastily shoved his black mask on. He hoped whoever it was hadn't seen him but, for precautions, he couldn't let this person get away. He closed his eyes, communicating to his fox. When he opened his eyes, a fox was by his side, the same shadow fox that had eaten the body from earlier. They were about to leap at their pursuer when the fox sniffed the air. He turned to Naruto. "It's that Hokage woman's assistant." The fox disappeared and Naruto relaxed. Only Tsunade, Shizune and Jiraiya knew his true identity. The rest of the village called the mysterious ninja Hikage or Shadow. "Hikage, I was sent by Tsunade-sama to collect you. It seems you have a busy night tonight." She smiled. "Thanks, Shizune. I was just finishing here anyway." He stalked over to where Shizune stood. Together, they ran back to Konoha, Naruto full of apprehension and excitement. When they reached the Hokage Tower, Naruto was surprised to see his former team member Sakura in mid-conversation with the Hokage. Where he used to feel something for Sakura, he now admired how far she had come. She was an incredible medical nin, possibly even better than Tsunade herself. He was glad that he had kept his mask on. If he had removed it, there would have been complications. The less people who knew his identity, the better. Sakura looked up, confused, when the black-clad ninja entered. She had heard rumors of a black shadow, a ninja who protected Konoha no matter what. A ninja who had killed more people in the last few years than any Anbu member had in their career. She had found that statistic shocking, but now, when she looked at the man, she could feel amazing power radiating off him. "Sakura, take a seat. You don't need to go." The man's head jerked up, as if this was the last thing he expected. Frowning, Naruto was about to say something to Tsunade, but Shizune beat him to it. "Tsunade-sama, I thought you said, ignore what I said. This won't take long. I'm sure Hikage won't mind Sakura being briefed of a few things he has to do before dawn. Am I right?" Sakura noticed the man hadn't spoken yet. She wondered what his voice would be like, and if it revealed anything about his identity. Of course, in answer to Tsunade's question, he merely nodded and Sakura shuffled, annoyed, in her chair. "Here are the files." Tsunade handed over a thick pile of papers to the man. He stretched a tanned hand to grab them. Sakura noticed a red mark running the length of his hand and down onto his wrist. "Tsunade-sama, he's hurt his hand. May I heal it? I mean, if he's to do something before dawn then he should be in good health, right?" Tsunade smiled grimly. "He's not like you or I, Sakura. He'll keep going, just to achieve his goals." Tsunade looked at Naruto from the corner of her eye. Using another skill he had picked up during the unspoken training, he sent a message to her brain. "Let her if she wants to. I know how annoyed she gets if she can't do something to help. Go on, Sakura." Shocked, Sakura strode forward and took the tanned hand. She was surprised at how smooth it was. After all, a warrior's hand was usually scarred from countless battles. Was it that made him so special? She gathered the necessary chakra and went to heal the cut, only to find that it had vanished. There was only deep blood left in a jagged line where the cut used to be. She frowned, then jumped when she heard laughter. The man was laughing. It seemed he couldn't stop and he clutched his side with tears spilling out of the corners of his closed eyes. Inside Naruto, Kyuubi was in a fit of madness. Naruto hadn't laughed in the past 5 years. He had barely smiled and now he had gone hysterical. "He's finally cracked," thought the fox. "I'm going to have to take over now or they'll have to kill us." When the laughter stopped, both Shizune and Tsunade froze. They recognized the change in the man before them and held their breath as deep purple-red eyes focused on them. "You're not supposed to come out." Sakura was puzzled. She had hardly felt a change in the atmosphere, but people who knew what the Kyuubi Naruto felt like could hardly forget it. "That's nice. If you want to know, I had to stop him laughing. I haven't laughed in about 5 years. I was worried you'd kill me because you thought that I had finally snapped. God knows that's overdue." Sakura's eyes widened a fraction. This voice was hauntingly familiar. It was deep and slightly husky. If the atmosphere wasn't so tense, she knew she would have found it extremely attractive. The man's body shuddered and the man doubled over and clutched the desk. "I told him not to eat so quickly, but what does he bloody go and do?" Naruto looked up and was momentarily surprised to see 3 people staring at him. Coughing uncomfortably, he straightened up and looked down at the files he had managed to keep hold of. "Now, your mission. To exterminate all 20 of those men. The casualties may rise above the allocated number, but try not to kill more than 20. As usual, bring something back." Tsunade pulled out a small wire box from under her desk. Naruto, knowing the schedule, pulled out the 5 eyeballs he had taken earlier. Sakura recoiled in horror. Not only had this man killed, but he had cut eyeballs out of his victims. He was truly a monstrous machine. The man sighed and pulled off his long black cloak. "Won't need this then." Sakura's eyes ran over his muscular arms. The top ended just after his shoulder and it clung slightly to his body, due to the amount of muscle beneath the skin. She noticed a few more bloody lines on his arms where cuts and scratches had vanished. Before he turned, she caught sight of a blue tattoo of the Anbu inked into the muscular arm. He dumped the bundle of material in front of Tsunade and nodded to her, Shizune and Sakura herself. Sakura forced herself to look into those eyes, but, to her surprise, she saw a deep blue, with a hint of purple. As the man tore his gaze away, she felt that she was missing something extremely important. Naruto took off, annoyed at his mistake. He knew Sakura would eventually recognize him, that's why he had planned not to look at her. His eyes were unique. No one else had eyes as blue as his used to be. Now they had become even more unique, if possible. They were still the deep blue, but something in them, the purple from Kyuubi's red eyes, hinted at unimaginable power and an almost animalistic power behind them. Naruto ran through the almost deserted streets of Konoha unnoticed in the shadows. He pushed all thoughts of humanity from his mind and focused on Kyuubi's words. Together, they ran to face their challenge. Naruto stumbled into Tsunade's office. She wasn't there, of course. She expected him in the morning, well rested and satisfied with the job. He was far from satisfied. He was covered in numerous wounds from the surprise attack. It had been almost 200 shinobi against him, but Naruto had managed to kill almost all. Only a few had managed to escape. He gasped as he lay down on the chairs Sakura had occupied earlier. Weapons of all kinds dug deeper into his side as he put his weight on it. He was too tired to care. He took the mask off, throwing it to the floor. His top followed, landing untidily on top of the mask. He left the trousers and shoes. It hurt to bend over. He closed his sore eyes, wishing the equally exhausted fox a good night. He slept restlessly, shifting slightly and sending waves of pain through his body. He didn't once open his eyes, until the door banged open and an angry Tsunade stormed in. She slammed the door, a noise which made Naruto's head throb. He gingerly opened an eye, only to see Tsunade's back. She still hadn't noticed the blonde man lying broken on her chairs. He groaned as he attempted to get up. Tsunade whipped round, eyes blazing. Who the hell? Oh my god. She rushed over to his bloody side. What the hell happened? Her eyes were overcast with worry. Before she started removing the weapons from his half-healed body, she rushed to the door and locked it. She set to work at once, ignoring the pained moans of the young man under her hands. I know Naruto, I know it hurts. Please just bear it a little longer. And you, Kyuubi, please. I've never really regarded you as anything but now, I realize how important you are for Naruto. Please, stay with us. Beneath her, Naruto's arms twitched. Tsunade removed the last object from his side and healed a few of the major injuries. Naruto had to heal the rest. It was something not even she would be able to do for him, for neither of them would forgive her. He fell into a deep sleep and Tsunade grabbed a blanket from the cover. She covered him and admired his face. No other word could describe him. He was beautiful. She was usually the only one who saw his face nowadays. He hadn't walked openly maskless through Konoha for 5 years now. Tsunade had told his former friends he had gone to train, touring the hidden villages and completing training schedules she had set him. She knew this lie couldn't go on forever, but what could she tell them? Oh, by the way, you know your friend Naruto? Yeah, well, he's actually the genius assassin Hokage. Yeah, surprised? She snorted with laughter then turned to her desk. It would be hard to concentrate. She thought of Naruto as a brother, if not a son. When she had given him her cherished necklace, she had entrusted her hopes and dreams into the boy and now, single-handedly, she had condemned him. It was around midday when Naruto finally opened his sleep-crusted eyes. He was confused at first, wondering where he was, then he remembered. He inspected his body and found almost healed cuts. He felt someone else in the room and he sat up. He relaxed as he saw Tsunade smiling at him. Thank goodness, you're awake. He suddenly felt the breath knocked out of his chest. He was startled to feel a body hugging his. He hugged back, grateful for the first positive human interaction in 5 years. 5 years is a long time for a hug, Naruto choked out. Tsunade released him, eyes filled with tears of relief. She returned to her desk and chucked some clothes to Naruto. They were bigger than his usual black clothes. The top was loose-fitting and baggy, even over his muscular frame. It was black, as were the shoes he was given. Instead of black trousers though, he shoved on a pair of baggy jeans. He didn't bother to hide his body from the Hokage, he was still too tired to care. I'm giving you a few weeks off. Think of it as a holiday. Now go home and rest. Naruto smiled a true, beautiful smile. I see the importance of the loose clothes. Tsunade nodded. No one is to know just how much you've developed. If they knew, it would be problematic. Oh, and one more thing, here's a bandage for your arm. For the Anbu tattoo, that is. Naruto nodded and wrapped his bicep up in the thin bandage. So, I've been training for 5 years now, have I? Tsunade nodded and then, he was gone. It would have been an impressive exit. If he hadn't left his stuff behind. Sheepishly, a blonde head poked itself round the doorframe. Idiot. Oh, by the way, the Jonin exam's in 3 weeks. I'm adding you to the list. She met his confused look. The old Naruto would have wanted to. We have to keep suspicions away from you, Naruto. This is why you're to participate in the exam. Anyway, part of this year's will be teamwork and Team 7 has been missing a member for 2 years now. Naruto frowned. That meant, he came back? Yeah, Orochimaru gave up on him after he escaped for the 100th time. Funny really. I'm surprised you didn't know after all it's practically your skills that got him back. With your help, the Anbu teams located the bases. Anyways, he's back and so are you, for now. For them to take place, they need another team member and that just so happens to be you, Uzumaki. Now go quickly, I bet you're hungry. Her eyes widened as she realized what she had said. Okay. Kyuubi'll want something, but now I'm in the village he can't come out, can he? Well, I'll try and eat. I'll work something out. See you soon, old hag. Previously Tsunade would have beaten the boy senseless for this name, but now she was glad to have the carefree Naruto back, even if it was only for a while. Naruto fell down onto his bed. He sighed, digging his nose into the pillow. He was grateful for what Tsunade had done. He needed a rest. 5 years of haunting faces had to get to you sometimes, even when on the missions. He had planned on unpacking his very few possessions, but he couldn't move from the bed. He muttered a quick good night to the fox, then fell into a deep sleep. He was woken by the sound of the door being thrown open. He frowned and rubbed his eyes. The sunlight poured into the room from his curtain-less window. Hey, who's there? What gives you the right to stay in someone's apartment? Just because they're not here. The voice trailed off as the man eyed Naruto. Iruka-sensei. Naruto. Naruto beamed at his old teacher. The man grinned back then, without warning, grabbed Naruto in a ferocious bear hug. Where have you been? Everyone wondered where you were. We've all missed you. Iruka slackened his grip for a millisecond before crushing Naruto's ribs even more. Ah, Naruto winced. He was still tender from the attack. Oh, I'm so sorry. Iruka let go of him, a sheepish look on his face. After a moment's silence Naruto yawned. You hungry? Shall we go get some ramen? Naruto almost winced at the idea of food, but he couldn't afford to act out of character. Sure, you're treating right, Iruka-sensei. I want miso. He continued this hyperactive chat all the way until they reached Ichiraku's. When they sat down, Iruka ordered 2 bowls of ramen. After a few words they turned to their bowls. Iruka started at once, leaving Naruto feeling nauseous and uncomfortable. He had no choice. He wouldn't be able to rely on Kyuubi this time. At this moment the fox was encouraging Naruto to eat, saying that if he refused, his old teacher would know something was up, so he really had no choice. He sighed and pulled on a fake smile. Breaking the chopsticks in half, he gathered some noodles. Tentatively, he raised the noodles to his mouth and forced them in before he could change his mind. His whole body screamed at him and he fought the urge to throw up. He gritted his teeth and waited for the noodles to settle. He went to collect more noodles when he winced in pain. Dropping the chopsticks, he clutched his stomach. Iruka's worried face turned to Naruto. Naruto shook his head and indicated that he was having stomach problems. He made a show of the fact he needed the bathroom. In reality he didn't, but Naruto needed the man to think he had diarrhea so he would be excused from eating. Iruka understood and took Naruto home instantly. He left quickly after promising that he wouldn't tell anyone Naruto was here. Sighing, Naruto performed the necessary hand seals to collect shadows for Kyuubi's body. The fox appeared and rushed over to plastic bag Iruka had mentioned before he left. Inside were various items of food. The fox nosed through everything and chose a few things to eat. He returned to Naruto's side with a full belly and a glint in his eye. There's a note on the side, from the Hokage woman. Naruto steadily rose up. His sickness had subsided and he felt merely tired now. Picking up the piece of paper, he scanned it and confirmed his worst fears. Naruto, tomorrow Team 7 will be introduced to their new team member. You shall meet Hitaki Kakashi outside your apartment at 9, then meet your team at 10. Kakashi will no doubt be late to meet you, therefore making him late for the other 2. They won't know anything about you, not even Kakashi, I'm sure you know that though, and they don't even know when you're scheduled to be back, let alone that you're back now. Take care to hide your abilities, I know it must be hard for you. I'll be in contact soon. Tsunade. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow was going to be a tiring day. Sakura frowned and turned to her teammate, Uchiha Sasuke. Since he had returned from Orochimaru to find Naruto gone, Sasuke had become even more of a recluse than he previously had been. He was friendly enough, but if anyone asked him to go anywhere, he merely looked at them then shook his head. Naruto's disappearance had had that effect on most people who knew him enough to call him a friend. The village seemed quieter without him and the sun really didn't shine as bright. She sighed and Sasuke followed suit. Strictly speaking, Sakura, Sasuke and Kakashi were equal team members, so they didn't need an extra member for missions, only for the Jonin exam that Kakashi had already passed. Apparently, Tsunade had said that they needed to get into practice with the new addition to the team and, albeit rather reluctantly, Team 7 complied. The two shinobi sensed and heard two footsteps behind them. Finally, Sakura shouted, "You're late, Kaka." Her eyes widened as she saw the man with Kakashi. Sasuke, a little uneasy about Sakura's sudden silence, turned to face the pair. He too stopped in shock, mouth wide open. Kakashi smiled. Well, his eye turned up at the corners and his cheeks tightened under his mask. There stood a taller, more muscular Naruto. He no longer wore his forehead protector on his head, at least not at the moment. It was pushed down on his neck, the leaf insignia pushed to the back. His hair had grown a little and spiked downward now, rather than all over the place. A few clumps fell down onto his face and into his eyes. Sometimes he brushed stray hairs away with a smooth, tanned hand. He had a short-sleeved black top on with black shorts and the customary black shoes. A few accessories broke up the continuous black. A blue gem hung on a necklace by the knotted black fabric that attached his forehead protector to his neck and a pure white bandage circled his muscular arm. His face had lost all traces of infancy and his whiskers had grown lighter, contrasting against the tanned gold of his skin. His cheekbones had become more defined and Sakura found herself staring at Naruto, not just in amazement, but with a weird feeling in her stomach. She remembered it from her days when she had convinced herself she was in love with Sasuke. Well, this is your new, old, team member. I give you the rest of the day to get used to each other, have fun. The two Chunin glanced nervously at the newcomer. Sakura hadn't seen Naruto, that she'd been aware of, for 5 years while Sasuke hadn't seen him for 8. The other two haven't really changed, mused Naruto. Did they have to go through what you did? Sure, they've grown older and grown up, but were they forced to grow as you were? I doubt it, Naruto. I truly believe that it's just you and me in that category. Naruto thought about Kyuubi's words and realized how true he was. He was the equivalent to most people's nightmares and almost everyone felt a sensation of fear and awe pass through them when the name Hikage was whispered. Where did you go, Naruto? You came back for a week or so then you just disappeared. I missed you so much. For the 3rd time in 2 days, Naruto was suffocated in a bear hug. Sakura, no, I'm not letting you go again. If Sasuke hadn't returned, I think I would have broken down. I missed you so much, even more than you'll know. Eventually, Sakura was forced to let him go, as Naruto had turned an unhealthy color of grayish-purple due to lack of oxygen. Naruto smiled at Sasuke who, surprisingly, smiled back. I owe you a thank you. You helped me escape. That was all he said about his time with Orochimaru. Naruto realized he wasn't the only one with secrets. So you think you're up to Jonin standards yet, Dobi? Sasuke jeered, as usual. Teme, you have no idea. Naruto realized he was going to have to be careful. He could already feel the urge to peel the bandage off and reveal his Anbu tattoo. During the training, Naruto managed to act like his skills were still developing at a Chunin level and he did well to control not only his power, but his speed and accuracy. He told Kyuubi that it could be considered useful when fighting an opponent who underestimated them. Now they could play for a little bit before the kill. He was startled for a second, as he realized how calmly he had thought of murdering someone while he was in the company of his friends. Kyuubi reassured him that it was just an isolated incident, but Naruto himself was wary for the rest of the training period. They finished and each realized how much the others had improved. For Naruto, he was disappointed. He had hoped, by some miracle, that Sasuke had become even stronger than he had, even though he never wished that training for anyone. They tramped back to the village and paused at a crossroads. Instead of splitting, like Naruto expected, he was seized by a hand and was being dragged towards a restaurant. Crap, Naruto thought. Food. They stepped inside the open plan room. It had about 13 medium-sized tables dotted about the room surrounded by sturdy chairs. The smell of cooking food floated through the room from a hidden kitchen. Inside, Naruto's stomach had already started flipping and he tried hard not to let the pain show on his face. If he ate once in a few weeks, he could usually stand the smell without it causing too much damage, but his short meal with Iruka had only been a few hours ago. Naruto, be careful. I'll try and help but it seems impossible. A few seconds later, when they were seated at a table in the corner, Naruto's stomach relaxed a little. He nodded lightly, thanking Kyuubi for whatever the fox had managed to do. He looked up, remembering he had company. Smiling through the bolts of pain flashing through his stomach, Naruto convinced the two that nothing was wrong. A serving boy came over to the table and asked for their orders. Naruto broke into a sweat. What would he say? The Naruto they knew would have asked for anything and everything, but now, he couldn't even stand the smell of it. The three people around the table looked towards Naruto, expectantly. He was about to stutter an answer when a familiar voice broke through the restaurant. Turning around, they saw a white-haired man. He smiled, but only with his mouth. His crinkled eyes remained still and emotionless. Naruto, Tsunade wants to see you with a proper report, I guess. She wants you to go now. He turned to the other two shinobi. Sorry, it's urgent apparently. Naruto hastily stood, glad to have an excuse to get out of the restaurant. He practically fell against Jiraiya's side, to which Jiraiya commented on his usual clumsiness. Thanks Ero Sennin, he gasped. Anytime. Tsunade really does want to see you, so I guess you shouldn't thank me. Together they walked towards Tsunade's office. Naruto's stomach settled as he got farther away from the smell of food and, by the time they were standing before Tsunade, he felt almost normal again. Ah, Naruto. Good to see you again in such a short time. How ya feeling? Fine thanks Granny. Oh and thanks for calling me here. Sasuke and Sakura had just taken me to a restaurant. I see. Well, is Kyuubi hungry? She spoke in a way that showed she was innocently questioning him, only to have an alternative motive. Is it a mission, Tsunade-sama? Hey, you caught on then. Yeah, only you don't have to accept the missions that come in for you. I'll send Anbu teams, 5 men or so should be able to take one down at least. Take longer but we can deal with time. Naruto considered this. If he still carried on his missions, he would be able to improve his skills without holding anything back, as he would be with Team 7. I'll do them. Tsunade and Jiraiya looked at each other, clearly shocked. But your holiday. Why should the Hokage of Konoha rest? People's lives are on the line and if I didn't do anything, I could never forgive myself. There is a slight problem though, my clothes were ripped beyond repair. Tsunade grinned evilly. Already sorted. New top, trousers and shoes over there. And here is your new mask. She beamed as she handed it to Naruto. He took it, admiring its simple beauty. It was like his old Anbu mask with the exception of the colors. Instead of red on white, deep grays entwined with lighter grays to form markings that distinguished themselves a fox shape. It was set on a midnight black molded mask. He looked over the clothes. They too had intricate gray patterns weaved into them. He was amazed. Something of this quality would surely be worth a fortune. Why was it in his possession? Hokage-sama, I cannot possibly accept this. For someone of my work, it would only be wasted. You don't seem to understand Naruto. This was made for your purposes. It was meant for you when you took the most dangerous missions, but I feel they have surfaced without us knowing. Its power will only truly work for you and Kyuubi. It isn't just clothing but a defensive weapon that is practically unbreakable in its hour of need. He nodded then bowed his pale face. Tsunade smiled sweetly and, with a hint of regret and guilt, handed him the necessary files. Naruto took them, scanned through them and pulled on his new attire. It surprised him how at home he felt in these new clothes. He felt completely at ease, something he never had before. On all his previous missions, he had felt something close to fear before he set out, but now, his mind and body were calmed and he truly felt like the demon the town made him out to be. His blue-violet eyes faded to a light shade of purple before he slipped on the mask. Blonde hair was visible but he doubted that anyone would recognize him by his hair. The faceless mask turned to face the Hokage. She flinched at the sight of the man she had watched grow. He deserved the name Hokage for he was just like a shadow. The clothes appeared to ripple as he prepared to move and both Sannin stepped closer together, equally frightened and amazed at the power radiating from the figure before them. "Good luck," Jiraiya whispered as Hikage slunk into the deepening shadows outside and vanished. Naruto returned home late. The mission had run almost perfectly, if not for the intervention of one man and his followers. These people had haunted Naruto ever since he had completed training. They had taken him and changed him to suit their needs. Now they wanted to stake their claim and reel their property back in. With a sigh, he flung himself onto the bed. How he had managed to take off his clothes and store them away was a mystery to him. He felt as though he could sleep for a decade and drifted straight off to sleep. When he awoke, the sun was bright in the sky. Blue eyes blinked in surprise as he realized that, for the first time in over 5 years, he had overslept without any injuries. Normally the only time he would oversleep would be if he had any injuries, and he had come back virtually unscathed from the mission. He cursed suddenly. He doubted he would have enough time to hand a report in to Tsunade before meeting with his team. He dressed quickly in dark clothes and, at a run, took off to the Hokage Tower. He barely registered cries of his own name, most likely from his old friends, as he continued onwards to the tower. He desperately wanted to use one of his own methods of transportation or even a jutsu to improve his speed, but he was supposed to be a Chunin, not the Hikage, and within Konoha's walls, even he had boundaries. Finally he made it to Tsunade's door. Without a knock, for he knew he didn't need one, he stepped inside. He didn't expect to see Sakura there, who glared at him for interrupting her conversation. Sorry, shall I come back later?" Sakura was about to speak when Tsunade shook her head. "Come and sit down, Naruto. We can talk after Sakura has finished." Sakura stole a quick glance at her team member. Although she wasn't annoyed at him, he had interrupted her during an important meeting. Due to the mission Shizune-san is currently on, the Anbu reports have been passed on to me. A message that their captain asked me to pass on was that Akatsuki have been seen around here. He didn't write it down in fear of the message being seen. That's why I was told to report it directly to you. Tsunade looked thoughtful for a moment before sighing lightly. "This may be out of place, Tsunade-sama, but if the Akatsuki group have been spotted around here, then surely the Hikage should have done something after all." "Wait," Tsunade jerked her head to look at Naruto. Her eyes were wide. He wouldn't tell Sakura, right? Who is the Hikage? Naruto rubbed the back of his head and put on a goofy grin. Sakura frowned while Tsunade inwardly sighed in relief. "The Hikage, Naruto, is Konoha's protector. We only found out about him like 3 years ago. He abolishes all threats to our village." Naruto nodded vigorously and Tsunade smiled. "Thank you, Sakura, and in answer to your question, I'm sure the Hikage knows the Akatsuki are here. He must have his own reasons for letting them remain. To truly know the answer, we would have to ask the man himself, something I am not prepared to do. I will not question his loyalty to the village nor his methods. If anyone even suggests this, then please tell me, Sakura. We don't need distrust brewing among us." Sakura nodded firmly and turned to leave. "Nay, Sakura-chan. Would you tell Kakashi-sensei that I may be late? If you are, then yeah. I doubt it. Your conversation's unlikely to go on for 3 hours, is it?" Naruto grinned and Sakura returned the smile. "See you later then." Naruto merely nodded, grin still plastered to his lips. The door shut and Naruto looked at Tsunade, grin completely removed from his face. "Mission complete. I have a report on the information I obtained from the persons, no souvenirs this time." Tsunade nodded, satisfied. "Naruto, for the Jonin exams, how would you feel if I put you back onto the Anbu list? It's just that we have an odd number of Anbu able to be involved and an even number of Chunin." Naruto smiled softly. "It would be an honor, Tsunade-sama. I haven't worn the old mask for ages, it would be somewhat refreshing." Tsunade nodded before pulling a shallow cup out of her drawer. "Sake?" Naruto gaped at the Hokage. "When Shizune-chan isn't here, you really let yourself go, don't you?" Tsunade lunged for the nearest object, a paperweight. She flung it at Naruto, who only grinned mischievously before vanishing out of her door. "I really should get a lock," Tsunade mused, before downing the cup of sake and pouring herself another one. Naruto sighed. Today would be a long day. Fortunately, he was later than Kakashi, so he didn't have much time to discuss his previous whereabouts with his team members. Kakashi informed them that they had a simple C-B ranked mission. We shall be the one-day escort for a high-ranking fire country official. Get your stuff, we leave in a quarter of an hour." With that, Kakashi vanished and the remainder of the team shrugged at each other. Naruto smiled widely before walking off, waving a hand in the other's direction. Sakura narrowed her eyes and turned to Sasuke. "Something's up with him, don't you think, Sasuke?" Silence. "Sasuke? Still nothing. Sasu. Why'd I bother?" Sakura pointed one arm in the direction Naruto had walked off and the other at the empty space where Sasuke had stood the previous minute. With a sigh, Sakura walked off back to her home. The fire country official was hiding something, Naruto could tell. He suspected that Kakashi knew yet couldn't be sure. He guessed it was the way that the man kept looking around, eyes never focusing on one particular place for too long, as if he was prey to a stalking animal. Naruto could also smell the sweat that was almost pouring off of his body. No innocent man would sweat that much. "We'll stop up ahead for lunch," Kakashi spoke suddenly. Sakura and Sasuke nodded while the official looked at Kakashi, blank eyes widening slightly. Naruto noticed the narrowing of Kakashi's eyes and, in that instant, knew he suspected the man as much as he himself did. He was itching to call out his shadow fox yet knew he couldn't risk it. Even if he made it so that the fox wouldn't be seen, Kakashi at least would feel the chakra, instantly recognizing it at such close proximity. "Here we are, everyone please rest but remain aware." Kakashi sat himself down on one of the large rocks nearby and Sasuke, Sakura and the official sat down on the others. "Can I go look around, Kakashi-sensei?" Kakashi looked up, curiosity in his eye. "I think it would be appropriate if we remained in pairs. May I also come?" Naruto nodded. "So Kakashi understands my meaning for this, looking around." The silver-haired man placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder and the pain walked off to the trees a little way off. "I take it that you've realized the man is hiding something?" Naruto nodded. "It's written in the way that he talks and the way he moves. He's constantly wary of his surrounding, like a rabbit near the fox's den." Kakashi nodded and placed a hand on his chin. "Say, Naruto, have you ever considered going into Anbu?" Naruto subconsciously rubbed his tattoo through his clothes and pretended to think. His eyes shut and he didn't see Kakashi's eyebrow rise as his hand moved to his arm. He didn't see the hand traveling his way either and it was too late to pull away as Kakashi pulled up a black sleeve to reveal the blue swirl. Kakashi grinned in triumph. "I figured as much. I heard that someone had taken up the Kitsune mask. The mask that all others denied, claiming it cursed. I'm proud of you but, why are you taking a Jonin exam if?" He trailed off uncertainly. "I was supposed to be training these past years and that means I cannot have been in Anbu if I wasn't here." Kakashi nodded before frowning. "Then what were you doing?" "I missed you, Blondie." Naruto saw Kakashi's hand again coming towards him and flinched automatically. Instead of a hit on the head, he felt a hand running through his hair, ruffling it up. I'm not a kid anymore, Kakashi-sensei." Kakashi smiled and removed his hand. "I know. I'm just reminiscing when you used to be this small." He brought a hand up to his waist and smiled merrily as Naruto frowned. "That was a long time ago. I bet I'm taller than you now." Kakashi chuckled as Naruto stood next to him. Naruto's hand cut sideways to reveal that he was correct, if only by a hair's width. "You've grown up so quickly, Naruto. Now back to the matter in hand. What do you think he's hiding?" Naruto frowned again. It could be one of many things. The official may have lied about the mission details, much like the mission back in the waves so many years before. He may have hired shinobi to attack them or possibly be carrying something he shouldn't. The possibilities were endless. That I do not know. Kakashi sighed. "Shall we do it the long way then?" Naruto raised an eyebrow in curiosity as Kakashi pulled his hands together. His eyes almost couldn't see the speed at which Kakashi made his seals yet smiled when he recognized the sequence. Kachiyose no Jutsu. The smoke cleared to reveal Pakun. Kakashi smiled at him and the dog grinned back. Pakun suddenly noticed Naruto and barked. "Hey brat, haven't seen you for a while." Naruto chuckled and crouched down to rub the little dog's head. "You've got work, Pakun. We're currently on a mission and neither Naruto nor I trust the civilian. He is a fire country official yet no one of real importance. Please keep your distance." Sasuke and Sakura are unaware of this development. The dog's head bobbed up and down before he looked at Naruto. "No fox today?" Naruto flinched. Of course the dog would know, his nose was Naruto's enemy. I do not know what you mean. Pakun barked out a laugh. Of course not. Let me hide in the shadows then. With that, Pakun bolted into the nearby trees while Kakashi looked at Naruto with cautious eyes. Naruto, he began. Naruto looked Kakashi in the eye. He wasn't afraid of Kakashi finding out who he was. It was more other people finding out Kakashi knew. Especially them. Whatever you are thinking, spit it out. Kakashi cocked his head slightly to the side before smiling. Do you think Sasuke has killed Sakura yet? Naruto blinked. So, that's it? Now it was Kakashi's turn to blink. You want a cookie for being a ruthless killer? I'll give you one anyway, but it's a figure of speech. He was cut off by Naruto's glare. I mean, it's surprising, but I am proud of you. You've still managed to keep your sanity, and that deserves respect. Don't lose yourself, Naruto. If you ever feel yourself slipping, get out while you can. Naruto turned sad eyes towards his teacher. You didn't pull out in time when you slipped, did you? Kakashi shook his head sadly. No, and I have regretted it ever since. The Anbu was some of my best and worst times I have had, yet I wouldn't change it. I just wished I had seen the signs before the pressure caved in. When it falls, it hits you hard. Naruto smiled softly and placed his hand on Kakashi's shoulder. Like you said, we better get back, otherwise Sasuke may really kill Sakura. Kakashi laughed and the pair met back with the group. Naruto pulled on a fake smile. Noticing the worried look, Kakashi shot him as he noticed the smile. Naruto, he whispered, why do you pretend still? People prefer a goofy and seemingly open person. That way it's easier to take them down when they become a threat, he hissed back. Kakashi nodded before pushing through the final branches to reveal Sakura chatting merrily to the stoic males. Naruto could smell Pakun nearby and lifted up the corners of his grin slightly, allowing a little of his true smile to show. Oh, you're back. Sakura stood up and smiled. Get any information? Kakashi shook his head. Not really. It's just a bog-standard wood. The Fire Country official suddenly made a movement inside his clothes and Naruto's head snapped round. Hand it over, he hissed dangerously and outstretched his hand. The official widened his eyes before shuddering. I do. Do NN not know what you mean? Cut the bullshit. Naruto's voice dropped suddenly and his eyes flashed to a darker shade. I won't repeat myself again, now hand it over. The official seemed to slump inside of himself before reaching inside of his robe and dropping a scroll on the ground. What do we have near him? Oh, Naruto picked the scroll up and examined the title. How nice, information on the defeat of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. A biased version, I might add. The official looked down while Kakashi turned sad eyes to Naruto. How did you tell? The official's voice was defeated and he looked suddenly old and tired. It smells of fox. Pakun landed next to his summoner as he finished his sentence. It smelled of fox and I recognized the scent of the writer, an old member of Konohagakure's council. I'm assuming you were taking this to the Akatsuki? No. All heads turned to Naruto. Kakashi frowned. Naruto. Not the Akatsuki. Another organization, he concluded and looked straight into the official's eyes. I do believe that the Anbu will need to interrogate you. What do you think, Kakashi-senpai? I've heard Inu and Kitsune excel in that area. Kakashi almost shuddered at the implication of Naruto's words. He wanted them to interrogate the man, leaving no chance of him being found innocent. It will need to go through Hokage-sama first, but it sounds like a good plan. Sasuke, Sakura, please take each side of the captive. Naruto, behind. I shall lead. The group instantly formed their diamond shape with the official in the center. Just as they managed to get into places, Naruto passed by the official and whispered in his ear. Next time you try to steal a scroll on me, make sure I am not on your mission. Oh, and try to work on the not guilty act as well. The man paled and Naruto smiled sadistically. It felt good to be back. The date of the interrogation was set for the day after the Junin exam finale. Naruto had had his request granted. Both he and Kakashi would be leading the investigation. For now, however, Naruto had to calm the fire burning in his blood and focus on the Junin exam. As it was, he didn't have long to wait. The exam start was scheduled for the next day. All he had to do was wait it out and remember to keep his true talents hidden. Tsunade had clarified his positions. He would pull out of the exam at the last stage due to a sudden request from the Hokage via Shizune. What this request was, they had yet to decide. He would then return as an Anbu member, kitted out fully to participate in the next part of the exam. Simple, if executed correctly. Naruto knew it would be dangerous, possibly even more so than his usual missions. He would be fighting, clad as an elite shinobi, in front of, and possibly against, his old friends. He had to take extra care so as not to reveal any signature techniques. He wouldn't even be able to use any of his shadow techniques, as this would put him in an even more uncomfortable position. There were so many things he wouldn't be able to. He sighed. Since when had life become so difficult? Tsunade had given him time off in preparation for the exam. Naruto could only think that keeping him in had been a bad decision. It didn't help his anxiety for the next day to be over and made it hard for him to focus properly. So many expectations were upon his shoulders that he reckoned he should receive a prize if everything ran smoothly. With a loud sigh, Naruto heaved himself up off of his position on the floor and walked over to the door. Slipping on his shoes, he opened the door and walked away from his apartment. Glares followed him, burning minuscule holes into his back. He had grown immune to this treatment so long ago, yet now, due to the absences, the pain had become sharper and it sliced through his defenses. In all honesty, it hurt. He walked past a pair of women and heard only a few words of their conversation. He turned away, disgusted. Kyuubi, how can people think of others like that? Of course, the fox held no answer, for he wasn't a person or even human. He was the subject of much hatred, usually with good cause. Still Naruto walked on, past the buzzing restaurants and the not-so-hushed whispers. He hardened his eyes and carried on, holding his head high. He noticed a person, still quite far away, begin to follow, yet he made no action to even seem like he knew that person was there. He just carried on walking. Finally, he turned to the stalker, smiling. "Sasuke," he greeted. Sasuke looked around. Naruto had walked to a place that held controversial feelings for Team 7. Although it was the place where they graduated, many brave shinobi names had been carved into the odd-angled shape that stood proudly in the center, dim sunlight glinting off of the polished stone. "Why did you come here, Naruto?" Naruto looked up. He had no smile on his face and moved over to the stone. He peered at the names scripted into the surface and smiled softly. "Say, Sasuke? Do you remember when we took the Genin exam and I told Kakashi-sensei that I wanted to be on this stone?" Sasuke nodded, unsure of where this conversation was headed. "I come here every now and then. Yet each time I look, I see no Uzumaki. Plenty of other shinobi names, Naras, Uminos and Inuzuka are. Even Uchihas. Not a single Uzumaki though. Now that could mean one of two things. Either the Uzumaki clan is incredibly gifted and talented so that not a single member has ever been killed in battle, even against the Kyuubi no Kitsune, or that they never existed. Not here at least. Given the fact that I have no parents suggests that the second theory is correct." Sasuke looked at Naruto's face. He was unnerved by what he saw. Naruto's features mirrored the stones, emotionless and cold. "It's odd though. My father's name was on here all the time, yet I was so blind before not to truly see it. I mean, I saw it, but only that far." Naruto ran his thumb over a neatly scripted name. Being too far away, Sasuke couldn't glance at the name, yet he could clearly see the expression of hatred and longing upon Naruto's face. In a second, Naruto's emotions had turned and he looked at Sasuke, the beaming smile back in place. "Never mind me, Sasuke. I'm just rambling on about nothing, as usual." Naruto reached up a hand and scratched the back of his neck. The pair spent the rest of the day with Sakura, training together. Sasuke kept running the conversation he had had with Naruto through his mind, each time becoming more and more confused. He knew that Naruto knew who his father was, yet didn't know who the mysterious man was exactly. Just another one of the shinobi that died in the attack, he suspected. When Naruto had said, "Kyuubi no Kitsune," his voice had been cold and full of hatred. Little did Sasuke know that this hatred was not directed at the demon itself, rather at the people who had viewed the young Uzumaki as a demon. "Sasuke-kun?" Sakura's concerned voice cut through his thoughts. "HN?" Sasuke turned his head to acknowledge the kunoichi. "Well, Naruto just left. Tsunade-sama wanted to speak to him. I was wondering if you wanted to have dinner with me tonight." Sasuke frowned. In all honesty, a meal with Sakura would be welcome at this moment, as old feelings had resurfaced. The last time he had taken a shinobi exam was after he had returned from Orochimaru, a particularly hard time for the Uchiha heir. What he really needed now was company, yet he had a burning desire to see what Naruto was up to. What would the Hokage want with Naruto at this time, right before the exams? Sorry Sakura, maybe another time? Sakura nodded and walked off. She realized that Sasuke probably wanted to be alone right now. Sasuke glanced at his team members receding back and sprinted off towards the Hokage tower. It was a good 5 minutes before he reached the street that the tall building was situated on, and he was panting slightly. He blinked as a raindrop splattered onto the bridge of his nose. Looking up to the sky, he saw a figure clothed in black running along Konohagakure's rooftops. With a snarl, Sasuke assumed this man must be a thief, or worse, an enemy shinobi. He took to the roofs, following the man. When he reached the city gates, it was clear where the man had gone to. Muddy footprints were evident in the wet earth. With a feral smile, Sasuke followed them silently. Some part of Sasuke's mind registered that this was a risky thing to do. Whoever this man was, he would most likely be stronger than him, and he should have told Tsunade-sama, who could have then sent him back up. It was too late now, and Sasuke ran blindly on, only to stop as a kunai blade nicked at the skin of his neck as an arm encircled his chest. Uchiha Sasuke, shouldn't you be inside of the walls? Sasuke remained silent, and the man let go of his prey. Uchiha, why exactly have you been following me since the village? Sasuke widened his eyes. This man had known that he had been following him since Konoha, yet had made no move against him. He decided to speak. You were running away from the tower holding something in your arms. That, coupled with the fact that I could not see any hite on you, I believe you have stolen something from the leaf. Sasuke had expected the man to fight, yet what he did was laugh. Uchiha, I'll tell you who I am. I'm the Hokage, and my job is to protect Konoha. In fact, I am here to meet with some people who I believe can help us. It would be far easier if you left. I'm sure you have mixed feelings about everything right now. That, coupled with the fact that you have your Junin exam tomorrow, does not fare well for your reputation. I understand that since coming back from the Sound, you have faced little prejudice, am I right? Well, in my eyes you are just a spoiled brat. Go home, Uchiha. Go home and study like a good boy. Although the shinobi's tone was not threatening, Sasuke felt as if this man was mocking him. He had heard about the Hokage, who hadn't, but he had dismissed all thoughts of the man as if he was a simple legend, dwelling in the domain of books and literature. With a glare in the man's direction, Sasuke stalked back to the village. In hindsight, he wondered what the hell he had done. Once again he was questioning his actions. Possibly he should carry the title of Dobi, not Naruto. The Hokage watched as the youngest Uchiha walked off into the trees. He hadn't thought that Sasuke would go that easily, but he guessed the Uchiha didn't want to land back in hot water with the Hokage. No shinobi was technically allowed outside of the hidden villages unless they had requested permission or in emergency situations. Naruto placed his hands together and called out to the Kyuubi inside of him. A second later, a red-orange fox stood in place of the man. It span round, checking that all limbs had transformed before snorting happily. He was off to meet the Akatsuki. Since Naruto had taken on the position of Hokage, the Akatsuki had seemed like a walk in the park compared to the group he now faced. Well, maybe not a walk in the park, but tamer and more resolute than the others. At least the Akatsuki had a somewhat daunting and admirable, albeit in a strange way, target. The others had nothing, just a need for raw power. The fox took off at a run, paws pounding through the damp grass. He didn't have a lot of time, in fact he shouldn't be doing this at all. Tsunade had no idea that he was meeting with the supposed enemy, and he only shuddered at the thought of what she would do to him. He should be, at this current moment, patrolling the area as disturbances had been reported. Not that this worried the fox, he had planned this ahead and got the Akatsuki to secretly ruffle up a few feathers. It was a few minutes before he reached the huge knotted tree that was the designated meeting place, and the two men he was to talk with were already standing at the base of the trunk. Hokage-sama greeted one of the hooded figures. It was pointless really, the huge sword strapped to his back kind of gave away any illusions, given that you had met the man before. The fox sat down on the tree stump and curled its tail around its form. With a sharp look at the pair, the fox morphed fluidly into a black-clad man who nodded his head to the Akatsuki. Kisame-san, Itachi-san, thank you for joining me tonight. Hokage-sama does not know of this meeting, but if a treaty is negotiated tonight, then I will bring her to the next of our meetings. The shorter figure nodded and Kisame took his hood down. These hoods are far more practical than the old hats, you know, Hikage-sama. Not as liable to fall off or whatever. Plus they keep your ears warm. Kisame chuckled. Naruto suspected that it was out of nervousness rather than actual humor, yet he didn't mind. A laugh was a laugh and it did the trick to cut any tension in the area. The object of this treaty would be to work together until we cause the destruction of the organization Bokyaku, Oblivion. During which you will harbor no ill intentions towards Konohagakure or to any of its citizens. Including the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. We will make sure you do not breach this contract by using the blood signing system. Each of your members as well as all of Konoha's shinobi will be made to sign in their blood. Kisame turned to his hooded partner who in turn spoke calmly. I think it sounds like a pretty good deal, but what is in it for the Akatsuki? It's all very well you saying this, but all that this would do, would be to benefit your village. What exactly have you got against Bokyaku? The Akatsuki have reasons, yet Konohagakure apparently have none. If the Hikage was surprised, the man did not show it. He leant down slightly to the ground and plucked a blade of grass from the soil. For the Akatsuki, you will be given a safe passage through the village. After that, the Jinchuriki will comply with your needs. Silence stole through the woods as the Hikage finished his sentence. For Konoha to give up that particular shinobi meant that something bad connected them to Oblivion. Itachi, a man to never betray his emotions, frowned and spoke. I assume that Naruto-kun does not know of this? If he did, then how do you expect him to react? Kisame frowned as the Hikage chuckled and curled his fingers round the chin of his mask. He knows. The mask lifted up slightly, because the mask moved upwards and was off in a flash. He developed the terms. The Akatsuki pair was surprised to say the least. In front of them was the ever-elusive Kyuubi no Kitsune Jinchuriki. Not only had he agreed to death, he was one of the most renowned shinobi in the history of the ninja. You've come a long way, muttered Kisame. The Hikage smiled. I'd be willing to trade my life and the Kyuubi to bring down that organization. I have smoothed things over with the fox, he will go with you quietly. All we need to do is get the Hokage to back this and then your leader. Itachi finally pulled down his hood. How do we know that you won't trap us? That this isn't an elaborate plot to win our trust and then crush the Akatsuki. You still didn't say what you have against them. Naruto slipped his mask back on, but not before a grin was seen plastered on his face. I have to admit that I expected you to act this way. If you wish so, then I will tell you why I hate them. Before I became the Hikage, Tsunade-sama sent me into the forest to train with Kyuubi. It was harsh, but I did well until they caught up with me. All I will say for now is that I have ties to them. Ties I have always craved for yet wish never existed. Who I am today was shaped and formed by them, to them. I am the ultimate tool. Itachi nodded. He understood what the blonde had said yet knew Kisame hadn't. A few seconds passed and a cool wind floated into the trees. The fox regarded the Hikage and bowed its head to the Akatsuki. In return, Kisame smiled and Itachi bobbed his head. To win against Bokyaku would be a dream come true to both Konoha and Akatsuki. The only problem now was getting each side to comply. Itachi had no doubt that Akatsuki would be in favor of this treaty, yet he knew that the Hokage wouldn't be so understanding. Especially as Naruto would be using his life as the turning point of the deal. He rubbed his eyes and focused on the road ahead, pointedly ignoring Kisame's mutterings. Naruto returned to the job he had been requested to do by the Hokage, patrol the borders. With the Junin exams the next day, it was possible that some other villagers may see this as an opportunity to strike Konohagakure. Both the Hokage and Hikage would not allow this, and Tsunade had added an extra 2 teams of Anbu to patrol the borders as well as the Hikage himself. Picking up on the presence of a pair of nearby people, Naruto slunk into the shadows and gathered chakra to his ears to listen to the conversation. The Kyuubi brat is back from his trip. This voice belonged to a man older than 30. Will we be putting our plans into effect soon then? The second voice sounded younger but none less deadly. Soon, yes. If it becomes a Junin, then we will take immediate effect to destroy the demon. If not, then we shall gather supporters. We already have quite a lot. who will aid us to our noble cause. Naruto hung his head. He knew people talked about him in this way, yet each time he heard it, it cut into him a little deeper. With practiced silence, Naruto slunk round the side of the nearby trees and managed to sneak upon the pair. He was surprised to see that they were two Anbu. "Good evening, sirs," he began, secretly pleased to see the pair jump. "Ah, Hikage-sama." The man with the striped mask, the older man, bowed clumsily, signaling to his partner to do so as well. "It is a wonderful evening." "Of course, sirs. I must be getting on, but firstly I would like to impart some wisdom onto you." Both Anbu nodded tentatively, and Naruto could smell the nervous sweat from beneath their clothes. He couldn't blame them really. He had obviously caught them talking about one of the Hokage's precious people, and they would obviously have to face the consequences. It just so happened that their judge was the famed killer of shadows. If he decided they would be punished, then punished they would be. "Next time you talk about a fellow shinobi, keep your voices lower." Both Anbu widened their eyes underneath the masks as the man slunk into the shadows and quite literally vanished. Their masked faces turned to each other fleetingly before the pair split, rejoining the rest of the border patrol. Naruto smiled underneath his mask and shut his eyes. He was tempted to remove the bindings that held his mask in place, yet wouldn't dare risk his identity for the small bout of freedom. Tomorrow he could be free, and the day after that, he would be given a free rein on an enemy to Konohagakure. Oh, and the fact that he had managed to bargain with a dangerous organization and suggest a peace treaty just added the icing to the cake. With a quick glance to the sky above, Naruto noted that stars had started to appear in the inky blue sky. He turned his body so that it angled towards the village. It was time to inform the Hokage of the Akatsuki. "Hokage-sama," greeted Naruto as he slipped in through the wide window of the Hokage tower. He sat down in the chair that had been placed in front of the desk and linked his hands together. "Actually, Hikage-san, I was about to have a meeting on Uchiha Sasuke's progress and stability before the exam. It was requested by the council to make sure no harm comes to the heir during the examinations. You are welcome to join us, they should be here any moment." Naruto nodded and grinned slightly under the black mask. "It would be an honor for me to stay." A knock on the door announced the presence of the Elder Council and two other people. The Sandame's former team members stared on coldly at Tsunade, who, in turn, regarded the pair coldly. They nodded to each other before coming to sit in the chairs next to Naruto's vacated one. As to where the Hikage was now, he had positioned himself behind his leader. Naruto glanced over the other two people and was surprised to see Kakashi standing behind Sasuke. It made sense though, after all Kakashi was Sasuke's only sensei, forgetting Orochimaru, and would be the only one that they could discuss his progress and training with. "Hikage-sama will be joining us for the duration for this meeting," Tsunade announced. Kakashi looked up sharply at the almost invisible man behind the Hokage, and a soft smile came to his lips. It was times like this that Kakashi was extra grateful to his mask. If they had seen him smiling, it would have caused questions from the Uchiha and possibly from the Elder Council. "Tsunade-sama, it's not that we don't trust the Hikage, it's just that names would be far more appropriate. After all, we are a shinobi village. It's not healthy for so many secrets to be all over the place." Tsunade looked sharply at the old woman who had spoken. She had never liked her and had made it clear to the woman. Some secrets are needed. Take Sandame's law. Or the law about the incident. No one questioned what the incident was. Almost everyone present understood that it was an unofficial rule not to talk of the Uchiha massacre. Unless you wanted to be subject to the Uchiha glare that was. The woman narrowed her eyes and glared at the Hokage, yet said nothing more. She shot a venomous glance to the Hikage before settling down in her own chair. With a light tap from Kakashi, Sasuke followed pursuit and took the chair right in the line of fire, in front of Tsunade. "Meeting begins. Uchiha Sasuke, you are here to discuss your general well-being before the upcoming Junin exam tomorrow. If in any way we determine that you are unfit to participate in the exam, you will immediately be told so and will not be allowed to resume shinobi training until we deem suitable. Is that clear?" Sasuke paled a little yet managed to nod. "Hitaki Kakashi, as Junin sensei to Sasuke, how would you say his skills have developed?" Tsunade smiled gently at Kakashi as she spoke. "He has come far since the time that I first met him as a genin. Although I am no longer his teacher, I am his ranking superior and he has to follow order from me. He is a good listener and shows signs of being a good leader in the future. Sasuke's knowledge of jutsu had increased vastly and his control of his bloodline, the Sharingan, is improving with specialized training. Kakashi looked at Sasuke before continuing. Just after he returned from his extended training period, I noticed that Sasuke's attitude had changed somewhat. Before he had been mostly angry yet had been unable to harness this anger and so had let it control him. He now has a degree of control on this anger yet it could be improved further. One thing that is needed, however, is for him to learn to let go. Kakashi stopped, glanced at Sasuke once and sighed, before jealousy ruins his life again. If he is not properly trained in this area then I fear he will manifest certain symptoms again. Kakashi finished with a nod and looked into the Hokage's eyes. It had been a perfect report, what she expected from the former Anbu member. Thank you very much Hatake-san. From what you have told me, it appears that Sasuke will continue to grow. All he really needs every now and then is a push in the right direction maybe? Her question was left unanswered, just as she had expected. Tsunade's eyes locked on the council members and she smiled. Please, if you have any question, do go ahead and ask. The pair remained silent and Tsunade's smile widened. Then I assume that Uchiha Sasuke is deemed fit enough to participate in the exam tomorrow? The pair looked between themselves before nodding. It was somewhat reluctant. Tsunade and Naruto could tell that they didn't want their only Uchiha to undergo an exam that could, potentially, be life-threatening. Thank you, Hokage-sama. For the first time since entering the room, Sasuke had spoken. He bowed his head a little before following Kakashi's lead and standing. The elder council glanced once more at the silent figure of the Hokage before leaving. You go Sasuke. I need to talk to Hokage-sama and Tsunade-sama. I will meet you tomorrow, sleep well. Sasuke nodded before heading out of the door, shutting it with a soft clank. What are your thoughts, Hokage-sama? Naruto stepped out of the darkness and removed his dark clothing. Underneath he wore a simple black t-shirt and dark green shinobi trousers. He neatly stored his Hokage uniform in the Hokage's desk before turning to his former sensei. I think that, given they pass the exam, I would like to teach my generation. Tsunade turned in her chair to gape at the blonde man. Kakashi had raised his visible eyebrow and, although it was hidden, his mouth had formed a perfect "oh." You wish to what? Naruto smiled. Teach the graduates of my generation. Konoha needs force and who better to provide it than the Hokage? Tsunade put her head in the crook of her elbow as the leant against the desk in front of her. Anyone would think you wanted something, Naruto, Kakashi said quietly. Naruto shuffled slightly and Kakashi sighed. He did want something. Spill it, Naruto. Once again, Naruto shuffled uncomfortably. Well, the pair looked at the young man and sighed. Go on. Well, it's the Akatsuki, he stopped again. Go on, Naruto, Kakashi urged. Okay. Theoretically, and only theoretically, what would you do if I said we could fight with them to defeat an enemy? Tsunade buried her head in her hands. Naruto cut her off and started to protest. Before you reject the idea, please just think about it. It would mean we get to see the Akatsuki and they'd help us against Oblivion. Oh, Oblivion are worse than Akatsuki, Kakashi-sensei. I'll explain when we do the interrogation. Kakashi nodded, a little confused yet just managing to hold on to the conversation. So where were we? Oh yeah. Theoretically what if we could help the Akatsuki and they could help us by getting rid of a horrible enemy? Doesn't that sound nice? Tsunade mumbled something into the palms of her hands. Sorry. She tilted her head up and glared at the Uzumaki. I said that no it really doesn't and that you're crazy. Go home and sleep. Naruto pouted and narrowed his eyes. But Ba-chan, he knew he was being childish now yet everything else had failed. You know what they did to me, don't you want to get revenge? Or at least protect your village? Tsunade grimaced. Naruto did have a point there. She was the Hokage of Konoha and, as the Hokage, it was her job to eliminate threats. It was true. Bokyaku was a threat. Possibly a bigger one than the Akatsuki. Naruto. I'll consider it. Now get out of here, it's late and you have an exam tomorrow. Kakashi. Walk him back and make sure he gets some rest. Tuck him into bed if you have to. Kakashi laughed at that and grabbed Naruto's arm. Ignoring the protests, he teleported them to Naruto's apartment block. Here we are, True to my word. Do I really need to tuck you in? Naruto grinned. Pervert. Kakashi laughed again, the sound reverberating against the nearby buildings. You wish, Naruto. It was now Naruto's turn to laugh, and laugh he did. With a last smile at Kakashi, he waved goodbye to his sensei and walked up the stairs into the building. Kakashi watched him go and sighed heavily. Once you were an innocent, naive genin. Now look at you, you big joker. King of Shadows and Prince of Persuasion. How you have grown. The ANBU's captain. It was finally the day of the Junin exam, and two members of Team Kakashi were standing nervously by the entrance hall. Sasuke, as usual, stood slightly to one side and Sakura gazed over at him. Although she was looking directly at him, she wasn't focused on the Uchiha at all. Secretly she hoped that this exam would run smoothly, nothing like her first Chunin exam. Hey guys. The pair turned to the blonde Jinchuriki as he walked calmly down the path. Instead of his usual attire, Naruto was dressed in black shinobi trousers with a bright orange t-shirt. The blue gem hung round his neck and both arms were bandaged up to the wrist. He rubbed the nape of his neck and smiled. No one noticed that the smile never reached his eyes or the fact that Naruto was constantly looking around himself as if suspecting an attack any moment. Sakura smiled slightly when Naruto reached them, and Sasuke just looked at the blonde, still musing over his encounter with the Uzumaki the previous day. He hardly noticed when said Uzumaki was next to him and almost jumped when he spoke. Nervous Teme? There was a hidden humor in Naruto's voice that made his tone sound somewhat fake. With a frown, Sasuke put on a smirk and retorted. Only that you'll lag us back, Dobi. If Sasuke had been expecting an explosive reaction at that, he was sorely disappointed. Instead of the reaction both of his team members had been expecting, Naruto only smiled and stepped back, locking his hands together behind his head. A tuneless whistle escaped from his mouth as he leant back and let the sun caress his face. Yo! The hopeful Junins turned to the late comer and sighed. Even after almost a decade, Kakashi hadn't changed his antics at all. Naruto could tell that he wore a goofy, albeit fake, grin under his mask. Kakashi-sensei, finally decided to grace us with your heavenly presence? Kakashi chuckled and ruffled Naruto's hair, a habit he had recently developed. Naruto frowned and comically attempted to swat Kakashi's palm away, yet then changed tactics and ruffled his teacher's hair. Sasuke and Sakura looked on with raised eyebrows yet said nothing. They had long ago come to the conclusion that Naruto and Kakashi were just plain weird. Shall we then team? Kakashi gestured to the door and the four of them walked through the entrance. The sight they were greeted with wasn't a particularly happy one. Teams from many villages stood in different spots, each trying to outglare the others. Naruto nodded his head to the left slightly and both Sakura and Sasuke got the hint. They were to stand with the other leaf entries. When the three joined the group, they were greeted by Kiba, Ino, Hinata and Choji. The whole of Team 10, Guy's team, had become Junin in the previous exam, yet Naruto anticipated that they would be watching the battle. Shikamaru had quite literally been forced into the rank of Junin as he had been too lazy to apply. Tsunade had then purposefully given him a genin team in hope of livening him up. Needless to say, it was now rumored that Shikamaru was the new Kakashi, in the respect that he never passed a team. Shino was the other person expected to watch rather than take part as he had begun his clan training. This meant that it didn't really matter what position within Konoha's shinobi ranks he held, as he would be representing his clan within the council. Naruto had hardly seen his old friends since he had taken on the position of Hokage, so his fake persona actually merged with his real one when he greeted them enthusiastically. With the exception of his reaction to Hinata. Secretly he knew she had a major crush on him, yet in reality acted blind to it. He surmised that if she wasn't bold enough to do anything about it, then it was her loss really. Not that Naruto was considered with love at this point in time. With any luck he would be in the middle of a battle. He estimated in about a year's time. And then he wouldn't have to worry anymore due to the fact that he had given himself to the Akatsuki. Willingly. The whole room quietened down as two of the cages walked into the room. There, next to the beautiful Hokage of Konoha, stood the calm and collected Sand Wielder of the Wind. Gaara walked smoothly, eyes roaming over the room as if in search for one person. He was in luck. There was his fellow Jinchuriki and friend, Naruto. He caught the blonde's eye and made sure that the message of "I'll talk to you after" was understood. Gaara understood about Naruto's masks and different personalities. He himself had done something the same when he was younger. Instead of showing his fear of rejection and loneliness to the world, he had purposefully turned into a killing machine and had been forced to the conclusion that his existence in this world was one just to kill and destroy anything and everything that he touched. Although he didn't know of Naruto's secret identity as the Hokage, he knew the Kyuubi vessel wasn't as stupid or as loud as he looked. The Hokage cleared her throat and looked at the people in the room. In total, there were only about 30 people, 10 from Konoha, 3 from the rock, 3 from the mist, 5 from the cloud and, finally, 9 from the sand. Surprisingly, this was about average for a Chunin exam, as many shinobi either had no desire to go for the position or simply wished for that extra bit of time. As if it had been meticulously rehearsed, the examiner stepped up. Naruto grinned as he recognized the shocking purple hair and the devilish grin on the kunoichi's face. Mitarashi Anko, as beautifully crazy as ever, stood proudly at the front of the room, eyes scanning the room. In his short time as Anbu, Naruto had worked with Anko for a few weeks on an A-ranked mission. The pair had both found similarities between themselves, both had their lives changed thanks to Orochimaru, and had formed a somewhat formidable friendship. At the Anbu base, the pair had often been the bane of the other shinobi's existences. Practical joking had been one of the common interests both parties had held high and proudly. Naruto had been glad that he had found someone who understood the true art of practical jokes, even if it had been for such a short period of time. Naruto suddenly realized that his supposed armor had been cracked. He no longer had a life of solitude, due to the recent revelations and acceptance of friends and comrades. With a slight frown, he supposed that this had been the hidden message behind Tsunade's transfer of his position from secret to public. He would have cursed her, yet it was nice to know that he had a few people within Konoha who liked him for, well, him. Even if none of them knew exactly who, or, more correctly, what he was, it was still nice. Anko raised an eyebrow to the Uzumaki, who grinned in return. She shook her head slightly before turning her gaze to some of the shinobi near the front. The blonde grinned when the sharp smell of nervous sweat reached his nostrils. He almost felt sorry for the targeted ninja. Anko's looks were enough to make even the famous interrogator Morino Ibiki cower in fear. Satisfied that she had produced enough terror, Anko cleared her throat. The first part of this exam will be to eliminate any, here she paused to add a dramatic scan of the room, weakness in this competition. The room was a deathly silence, and Naruto was almost tempted to drop one of his hidden senbon needles just for effect. He restrained himself, though, and took a quick glance at his teammates. Sakura wore a slight worried frown on her face, as if she was battling with internal feelings. He didn't blame her. The way the purple-haired maniac was blabbering on about their first test made it seem as though they were going to die in a second, which Naruto wouldn't find so surprising. After all, it was Anko, yet was too well trained to betray all of her emotions. Sasuke, on the other hand, looked almost in his element. It was to be expected, really. The younger Uchiha really did live for the thrill of the battle. This exam would enable him to prove his worth to the Uzumaki, prove to him that the sting of betrayal had meant something at the least. To prove that he had, indeed, become stronger. Naruto tuned back into the conversation, adjusting his borrowed face to mirror a look of trepidation and excitement. In all fairness, this test was going to be a warm-up to the Hokage, and he seriously just wanted to go out and train with his fox. Not that he would be allowed that. Tsunade had forbidden him from letting the fox out in daylight. Not that he ever stuck to that particular rule, though. With what he managed to scrape out of the last few sentences of Anko's speech, he realized that they would have to pass an assault course individually. Each course would change slightly, and no one would know who passed, or failed, until they had completed it. Dropping out, it was made clear, was not an option. Once you entered the course, you had to pass through it. Once in, the only options you had were to pass through and then get your result, whether you passed or failed, or die there. It was a one-way system, and Naruto was almost sure that Anko had come up with this test all by herself. Who's first? This question was announced after each shinobi had signed the necessary agreement forms and had a little time to mull over their decisions. In effort to maintain his image, and for his own personal satisfaction, Naruto announced loudly that he would go first. Of course, in that sentence, the words beat, teme, and Hokage were incorporated as the Uzumaki rose to follow Anko. He realized then that the cages had disappeared, supposedly to meet the people who passed on the other side. Roughly taking his arm, Anko marched Naruto forwards and through the door she had entered earlier. As the door swung shut, Naruto was just able to hear the cry of, "Good luck, Naruto," from Sakura and allowed a real smile to pass over his face. "So, Gaki, what exactly are you doing in a Junin exame?" The words were low and seductive in his ear. If Naruto had been any less of a person or hadn't been raised as a killing machine, he would have caved in to Anko's passes. As it was, he knew that she knew it was just a game they played. "It seems I am no longer a good enough shinobi, Anko-chan. Before I go to my death, please tell me, once I walk through the doors ahead of me that I will pass?" Anko smiled. She knew Naruto would be the one to correctly guess the exam's true intentions. "It's just like that Chunin exam, the 10th question. Hey, nostalgic huh?" Anko merely nodded before letting go of Naruto's arm. "I guess I'll see you later then. I'll be watching you later, Kitsune-sama. I always enjoy the Anbu Junin battles. They're always so interesting." Naruto couldn't help but grin as the kunoichi walked off. There was something infectious about her that screamed at you to like her. Naruto had been told that he had the same quality. Or more accurately that his mask did. He turned to face the door and, without hesitation, pushed it open to reveal the two cages that had been present at the start of the exam. Tsunade was about to mutter, "Congratulations, you passed," yet the words never left her mouth as Naruto greeted them both with a, "Yo." Gaara merely rolled his eyes and Tsunade followed suit. "Figures it would be you, Uzumaki. Now get out of here. In fact, go join the other Anbu and warm up with them. No doubt they will love to see their ever-elusive ex-captain again." Naruto nodded and walked off. He stopped suddenly and looked back at Tsunade, who pointed in the opposite door to the one Naruto was facing. It seems even the famed Hokage wasn't immune to embarrassment as he sharply turned around and headed for the door that the Hokage's finger pointed to. The red blush that adorned his cheeks spread to his neck as he heard the quiet chuckle of the cage leak from his mouth. "Shut up, you," was the last thing he said before exiting the room. Tsunade glanced at Gaara before the pair did something very unprofessional, broke down into peals of laughter. Outside the door, Naruto gritted his teeth together and resisted the urge to shout back at them. He felt light all of a sudden, as if those years spent in the company of Bokyaku had been erased and he was still a simple, oblivious Chunin. He almost wished that his real self would subside and let the young, carefree and naive Naruto come forth. He sighed and turned his nose to the air. Naruto knew the smell of Anbu well. It was a scent all shinobi learnt to both fear and respect. The Anbu smelt primarily of blood and death, an omen and warning to all those they came into contact with. There was also the scent of something else that couldn't really be labeled as anything. Each Anbu, at their initiation, was given the powder that gave it the scent. All one had to do was to sprinkle some onto their uniform and they would be set to go. If it had to be given a name, Naruto would have called this smell, danger. It was the smell that warned you that something had happened, PR was about to, and that the situation was well out of your hands. Just one whiff made the stomach flip and knees begin to weaken. All of the Anbu, former and active, had trained themselves to stand the smell. Other shinobi from Konoha were hardly affected by it, intimidated by it yes, but it didn't send them into shock. This was mostly due to the fact that they came into contact with it subconsciously every day. Anbu members would pass through Konoha much like the Hokage attacked his victims, in the shadows. Naruto walked down the hall that led to the Anbu warm-up area. He could feel the chakra signatures of each shinobi and smiled softly. When he entered the small changing room adjacent to the warm-up ground, he automatically went to the locker in the far corner. He twisted the lock to his own personal combination. His former prankster side had purposefully designed the lock so that the code was 666, something many of his peers had considered unlucky, along with his mask design, and popped the clasp open. Reaching inside, he nodded as he felt the familiar fabric of the Anbu uniform. He changed quickly and silently before grabbing the remaining item in the locker and storing his normal clothes inside. He slipped the red and white kitsune mask over his hair and walked onto the training, warm-up grounds. The greeting he received was a mixed one. A few people sat on side benches, watching other groups train together. The people who were fighting didn't pay any notice to the newcomer as they were all too focused on the job at hand. The onlookers, for the most of them, turned to look at the newcomer. Naruto recognized most of the masks as Anbu who had served alongside him, yet he could see a few new faces. He sensed that the new faces, along with a few of the more familiar shinobi, looked at him in fear and had a superstitious attitude due to the fact that he wielded the kitsune mask. If only they knew who exactly was behind it, Naruto mused in his head. Ah! But then the secret would be out. Naruto smiled as the voice that had been silent for a while chose the opportunity to speak up. The remainder of his audience were emitting respect and, some of them, awe. This man, behind the kitsune-marked mask, was one of the strongest Anbu in Konohagakure's history. Even if none of them knew he was the Hokage, he had still managed to maintain a name within the Anbu as a strong captain. In his short time with them, Naruto had been a captain of a team. An owl-masked Anbu was the first to approach the young man. "It's good to see you again, Kitsune-sama. I hope that this time has fared well for you?" Naruto took the man's outstretched hand and shook it firmly. "And you too. Time has been hard yet bearable. I take it you took over the leadership once I left?" The masked man in front of Naruto nodded proudly. Naruto was glad he had become the leader. Owl was someone Naruto had believed had the skills to carry out mission with the uttermost perfection. "I assume you'll be the spare Hokage-sama mentioned to us to assess the Junins?" Naruto merely nodded and his former subordinate gestured towards one of the benches. Grateful of the man's kindness, Naruto walked over and sat down on the wood. "So now all we do now is wait?" The man nodded. "We'll be told exactly who we'll fight then. Our objective is to use the bare minimum of our skills to keep the Junin hopefuls from getting the scroll that we have. We're not to take our power level over that or B.A. rankings as to be fair on them." Hokage-sama originally wanted actual Junin for the job, yet the council objected. "No idea why, but it's now a training exercise for us. Just a bit of a laugh really." He paused and let his taiko digest the information. "Say, Kitsune-sama," Naruto turned to face him. "Are you returning to the forces? I mean, it's not that I want you back as my captain. I enjoy my position. But you were like a beacon of light to most of us. It's refreshing, I believe that's the right word, to be around you." Naruto smiled, aware of the fact the man beside him wouldn't be able to see. "Temporarily. Tomorrow Inu-san and I shall be interrogating a fire official that was found to have a scroll concerned with the Kyuubi no Kitsune on him. After that, I may for a short while, yet I hope to train a number of these Junin. Hoping that they pass, of course." Naruto sighed and placed his chin in his hands. "I need to train them for a special position. I fear we are on the brink of a war. I wish to train these people to handle the specific situations that they will be forced into soon. To tell you the truth, I doubt I will come out of it alive." Naruto didn't say that he knew he wouldn't be coming out alive. Somehow, even after all this time, he still didn't like the idea of an exact date on his death. His partner whistled quietly. "Good luck with that then," was all he said. Naruto liked that about the Anbu. No one pretended or covered up anything. It was to the point and blunt. Brutally honest would be another way to describe it. The two men sat in silence, blocking out the sounds of training Anbu around them, simply just enjoying life. It was quite some time later that the Hokage entered the training ground. By that time, Naruto had warmed up with the owl-masked Anbu and the pair had been reminiscing on a particular mission Naruto had governed. It had concerned one A-class missing nin, a rundown bar and some very dodgy alcohol that said missing nin had drunken. Needless to say, it had been an educational mission. Naruto had learned never to mix dangerous shinobi and alcohol if you wanted any hope of a battle. As expected, all of the entrants succeeded in passing the first test. The Hokage's voice gave away a little of her excitement of the upcoming events. "You will enter the ring and then the shinobi will pick out a stone from the pot. Whatever stone they pick will correspond to the Anbu they will fight. Your objective is to use as little power as you can and retain the scroll at the end of the allocated time of 10 minutes. If your opponent gets the scroll earlier, then the match will stop. This is important, do not use all of your power. I know you are stronger than you will appear to the others. It is unfortunate that the council overrode me on the issue of who was to fight the Chunin, yet we can do nothing about it. I don't want any deaths, so unless there is no other way to escape your own termination, Please refrain from killing them. The 30 Anbu nodded in unison before each disappearing from the Hokage's sight. She knew that they had gone to the arena and walked slowly off to join them. She had forgotten to mention that the audience would already be flooding in. Hell, she had forgotten to mention an audience at all. She wasn't bothered though, her Anbu were the best of the best and wouldn't be fazed by a tiny crowd. Okay, so not exactly tiny. Most of Konohagakure would be there. But that didn't really matter now, did it? Tsunade decided that, from now on, she was to have no sake, however little quantity, before important dates. It was too damn troublesome. The Chunin followed the case cage into the vast arena. They saw the neatly organized Anbu standing in the center near a large table. The Hokage was there, pencil and paper at hand. When the group reached her, she took note of the people who were there, which, coincidentally, was everyone that had entered except Naruto. Sasuke looked around. He ignored the crowd and the Anbu, searching instead for his loud team member. He could tell the other Konoha shinobi were doing the same. Was Naruto really the only one that had failed? A few of you may be wondering where Uzumaki Naruto is. Due to an unforeseen consequence, Uzumaki Naruto has been taken out of the exam. I will be happy to answer any questions regarding this after the exam has finished. Sasuke, for one, wasn't satisfied by this answer. To put it bluntly, he didn't need his Sharingan to see that it was a lie, and a badly constructed one at that. He made a mental note to speak personally with the Hokage after the exam. Granted that he first had to get to her, past her guards and such, to speak to her. The former rookies had little time to muse on Naruto's disappearance as the Hokage gestured to the front shinobi to come up to the front and select a stone from the pot. No one could see what was on the stone as the Hokage had purposefully sealed the pictures of the stones so that no shinobi could change his opponent. This gave each shinobi an equal footing in the battle, if there was such a thing. Sasuke looked over the Anbu, eyes stopping every now and again when he sensed a particularly strong member. When he sensed the Anbu at the very end of the line, he tensed. He had never felt a stronger chakra signature, even in his time with Orochimaru. The chakra was not only incredibly strong, it was almost malicious. It seemed as though there was something hidden within the figure of the Anbu, and Sasuke hoped that the stone he had wouldn't show up as that Anbu's. Once every Chunin held a stone, the Hokage gracefully waved her hand and the designated designs appeared on each of the smooth stone surfaces. Sasuke gulped and looked down with increasing dread. He shut his eyes and almost whined as the picture of a snarling fox had been carved into the stone. Searching the faces of the Anbu, just to check, the knot in his stomach grew as he looked at the fox-masked Anbu. He sensed the man's chakra and felt the malicious intent hidden beneath the power. Such maliciousness he had not felt since his time with Orochimaru. He had never wished to feel it again, yet fate, it seems, had decided to play with the youngest Uchiha. The battles passed quickly. Most fights remained at the designated 10 minutes. A few fights finished early, yet, so far, only about half of the people who had fought had become victorious. They had immediately been rushed out of the arena and into what Sasuke had dubbed the medical recovery area. Once they had their injuries healed, they had either joined the rest of the victors in the stand near the Hokage or had simply gone to the main stand. Sasuke could make out Sakura's pink hair on the other side of the arena. She had fought quite a while back and was sitting amongst the victors. It was something that Sasuke had suspected. He knew Sakura was an exceptionally talented shinobi, and she had proved that by taking the scroll from her bear-masked Anbu in just over 8 minutes. After this current fight was over, Sasuke would be fighting against what he believed to be the strongest Anbu. The Kitsune-masked man, Sasuke was sure, would spare no mercy because he was the Uchiha heir, and this made Sasuke grin in mad anticipation. He would be able to show some of his true skills since teaming with Orochimaru. He had a chance to prove how strong he had become, and how his strength would be used for Konoha's benefit. The harsh sound of a trumpet announced the battle between a sand kunoichi and the owl-masked Anbu's end. The kunoichi had failed, Sasuke could see, and she made a quick detour to the medical tent to heal a cut to the arm she had received. Most of the fights had been a battle of speed, quick thinking and taijutsu at the most. A few jutsus had been exchanged, yet this exam was mostly a test to assess the strength and success of each shinobi in a time's period. It was designed to apply pressure to the Junin yet also test their strength as a coordinator, as they would have to take on a genin team at some point. Sasuke felt the blood within his veins heat up as Tsunade called his name. He stood up from his point at the side of the arena and walked to the center. The fox Anbu calmly walked from the place where the Anbu had located and showed Sasuke where he was going to place the scroll. He clipped the strings onto his side, just above the hip. He nodded respectfully towards the Uchiha, who reciprocated the action out of politeness. Tsunade couldn't help but smile. This fight was going to be particularly interesting as Naruto hadn't had the chance to fight an opponent, without killing them, for a while. Beneath his mask, Naruto grinned in a feral manner and licked his lips. He couldn't allow the Kyuubi out for this battle, although he could feel the fox stirring within him. Yet it wouldn't hurt to allow the features he took on when he used the Kyuubi's techniques to surface. His eyes became red and slitted whilst his whisker marks darkened and canines lengthened. Behind his mask, he could do anything to his face and no one would ever know. He was hardly aware when Tsunade allowed the trumpet to signal the start of the allocated time. Sasuke took the offending position in the battle and wasted no time in preparation. Naruto smiled and sidestepped each of the Uchiha's kicks and punches. He knew that soon Sasuke would grow tired of this and would begin to broaden his horizons. Sure enough, Sasuke stopped in the taijutsu and pulled his hands together. Naruto heard the sound of birds and momentarily froze as the events of the Valley of the End flashed through his head. He hardly noticed the current of electricity flowing steadily towards him. Sasuke smirked. The Anbu had paused and the lightning flowed gratefully towards his feet. In a mere second, however, Sasuke coughed as the air rushed out of his lungs. He looked back to see a flash of golden orange around him. Within the crowd, Sakura heard mutters of the yellow flash, and how did he know that, from the onlooking shinobi? The villagers too had looks of doubt and fear on their faces, and Sakura really began to wonder then who this fox-masked Anbu member was. She wished that Sasuke would just hurry and get the scroll, yet also wanted to see more of the Anbu's techniques. Back on the floor, Sasuke pulled his hands together and created an unknown sequence. Naruto narrowed his eyes at that yet didn't allow it to bother him. Sasuke then charged an action Naruto would never have expected the Uchiha to take on. He assaulted the Anbu with a series of attacks for a few minutes until Sasuke appeared to grow tired. Naruto knew then what Sasuke was planning to do. The man in front of him was in fact a clone. The real Sasuke was hidden underneath, much like a snake would do. Naruto suspected that Orochimaru had taught him this technique. Naruto happened to feel for the Uchiha. He genuinely wanted Sasuke to pass to a Junin, regardless of what he had done in the past. Now Naruto was the only thing standing in his way, yet he'd be damned if he let the smug bastard pass without a huge kick up the backside. As the real Sasuke burst out of the ground, Naruto jumped, effectively avoiding the lightning that had blasted the earth open. The Uzumaki decided then that this battle would become one of speed and used the jutsu the Yondaime was so famous for to create a whirlwind effect around the Uchiha. As the red flash circled him, Sasuke frowned. He could feel a little blood dribble from the corner of his mouth, yet he brushed it aside with the pale back of his hand. He knew he had little time left, 3 minutes at the most, but refused to let this man beat him. He shifted his feet apart slightly and then chose to activate his bloodline. Sharingan eyes allowed him to slow the movements of the man down. All three Tomos had been trained meticulously by the Snake Sanin to follow almost impossible speeds, yet this was different. The man circling him was traveling faster than the Uchiha had seen anyone travel before. If he had been any less of a shinobi, Sasuke would have been taken back. As it was, he could literally hear the clock ticking and decided to use whatever he could. Once more he placed his hands together and summoned his old katana. The blade was a dark black and lightning automatically began to ripple across the metal. It was an instinctive action that Sasuke had missed and he grinned. He was beginning to remember some of the harder training he had been put through with Orochimaru and was almost thankful. With the slightly slower pace of the man, Sasuke lashed out into the red in rapid succession. His first 5 blows didn't manage to land, yet the 6th one chipped the shoulder of the Anbu. That was all the encouragement he needed. Sasuke could now follow the blood's path. Naruto almost cursed when Sasuke's blade hit his shoulder. He had used a lot of chakra up to maintain the red whirlwind and knew that, if he didn't pull out soon, he would need to rely on the fox's chakra. If he did that, then half of the spectators would know who he was and his whole facade would be buggered. He gritted his teeth together and jumped backwards as the Uchiha leapt towards him. Naruto saw the Sharingan then and bit down on his lip. Of course Sasuke would use it, it would aid him. Naruto sighed. If only he could use his full power. Then Sasuke wouldn't have time to use the Sharingan. Naruto flipped backwards and felt a hand at his side. He smiled softly behind his mask as he realized Sasuke had taken the scroll. As soon as the battle had started, it finished. Naruto bowed respectfully to Sasuke and walked off to the medical tent. The trumpets blared and Tsunade announced Sasuke as a winner. Sasuke walked to the medical tent feeling lightheaded. Although it hadn't been a hard battle, he had been pressured to think of a good plan and execute it in a little time. It was enough to give anyone a headache. The Anbu he had fought was now talking in a low voice to the owl-masked shinobi from the battle before theirs. Sasuke allowed a little chakra to gather in his ears and listened into what they were talking about. I take it as you and Inu-san will be reporting early tomorrow then? Correct, we wish to spend as long as we can to interrogate the man. It will not help Konoha if our enemies get the scroll on the events of the Kyuubi battle. I believe that that particular scroll also held a detailed map of the areas most affected by the attack. Something that an enemy would no doubt use to their advantage. Of course, Taiko. It will be nice having both you and Hitaki-san back in the headquarters. It has been a long time since he has visited us. The fox Anbu laughed and said, I believe he owes us a round at a bar. Maybe that's why he has become so elusive. The owl-masked man returned the laugh and nodded his head. Could be, Captain. Sasuke could feel the two Anbu close their conversation and retraced the chakra, paying more attention to the nurse in front of him. He had to admit, he was a little surprised that they had allowed the captain of the Anbu to take part in this exam, but what had got him was the fact they had mentioned Kakashi so easily. He knew Kakashi had been in the Anbu but had forgotten of the announcement Naruto had made on their last mission. Sasuke frowned as the nurse said he was fit to leave. How exactly did Naruto know of the Kitsune Anbu? And, for that matter, how did Kakashi know of him?
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.